Of course, there's more to the subjective side of emotion than the feeling body. There's the thinking mind. As I mentioned, a lot of times, if the emotion is really intense, the thinking mind becomes somewhat impaired. We have the experience of confusion, disorientation. We feel scattered in 1,000 directions, and it's hard to pull everything together. It's difficult for a human being to believe that something good comes out of opening up to discomfort in the body, but it's even more difficult for a human being to believe that something good comes out of opening up to confusion in the mind, because for an adult human being, the ego is really centered in the thinking mind. And the idea of just allowing confusion to be, to get stronger, to get weaker, to perhaps spread and last a long time, is absolutely anathema to the average person. It sounds like hell. It sounds like the last thing in the world that anybody would want to do. But in point of fact, there is an ordering principle, as I mentioned, that is so deep that it can never be disordered. That confusion still follows that ordering principle. Usually, our concept of order in the mind is that the content of the mind is clear, just as our concept of order in the body is that the body is experiencing pleasant sensations. But there is an ordering that is deeper than pleasure in the body or clarity in the mind. And when we participate in that ordering principle, we participate in the ordering principle of all of nature. And that's why we are merged with nature, with the source. Of course, for that period of time, be it a few seconds or a few minutes or a few hours, we're not ordered like a human being anymore. Sometimes a negative emotion can be so intense that we say this is absolutely inhuman. A situation can be inhuman. A physical pain can be inhuman. And we don't know what to do. But our language tells us what to do if only we'd listen to the language. Going through something inhuman, then for a short period of time, just temporarily, not forever and ever and ever, but for a period of time not to be a human. We're afraid. What does that mean? I'm going through something inhuman. No human can bear this. That means it's time to stop being a human for a while. So we're afraid, well, what will I become if I stop being human? Well, it very much depends on, of course, the way you stop being human, the path that you take to stop being human. You could take a path that culminates in insanity or suicide. That's not what we're talking about. But if you follow the path of attempting to be as precise as possible about what's going on, as allowing as possible about what's going on, and be aware of in what ways what's going on is changing, if you follow this path, then when the mind and body become untenable, which literally means we can't hold on to them, you realize you don't have to hold on to them. And your experience of the non-human will be a resting in the source of the human, in the fundamental flow of nature itself. Or, if you want, you can say that you are embraced by God. Not the God of belief, not the God of wishful thinking, not even the God of sentiment and piety, but actual God. But when you experience God, you have to understand that you can't be a human and experience God. You have to let go of the usual human ordering principles, which are clarity in the mind and comfort in the body. You let go of those ordering principles, and you discover a more fundamental ordering principle that fills all of nature. And in Buddhism, that ordering principle is called anicca, or impermanence. And so you unbecome the products of the source, which are your thoughts and feelings. After all, who wants to be your thoughts and feelings when your feelings are so uncomfortable? Moment by moment, there's nothing but discomfort in the body. Moment by moment, there's nothing but confusion in the mind. Who wants to be that? It's not time to be that. So you unbecome the products of the vibrating source of all things. And when you're willing to do that, then you might think you're going to become completely disordered, completely chaotic, completely out of control. But the confusion expands and contracts. It gets a little more, it gets a little less. It spreads, it grips. Within it is the flow of nature, the affirming and negating, the two sides of impermanence. The pain gets bigger, it gets smaller. The mind speeds up, it slows down. The two fundamental sides of nature, the affirming and negating, the yang and the yin, the spreading and the shrinking, these two sides of nature, you're in their hands now. And to the extent that you let go of the preoccupation with the content of the experience and you rest in the changing contour, well, you're not a human, but you are completely okay. This is called complete experience. It's also called transcending the limited identity, or going beyond happiness that is dependent on conditions. Let's say that you're going through a difficult emotion that only involves one flavor or quality of sensation. Let's say that it's fear, for example. So your mind is going through all sorts of thoughts about what could happen. For starters, though, try tuning into your body. Ignore the thoughts for a little while, if possible, and see if you can detect the actual sensation of fear. Is it primarily in one location? Is it in several disconnected locations? Let's say that you discover it's in one location. Tune into it and ask yourself the question, how large is the boundary of this sensation of fear? Feel it on the right, feel it on the left, feel it in front, feel it behind, feel it above, feel it below. See, is it confined within the body? Does it reach the boundaries of the ordinary physical body? Does it go beyond those boundaries? Maybe it seems to spread out into space around you. If that's the way you detect it, then that's what it is in that time. Of course, what's true of fear would be true of sadness, anger, embarrassment, and for that matter, it would also be true of joy or sexual feeling or friendly feeling. But here we'll, just to make it specific, talk about it in terms of fear. So now you have found the primary location of the fear quality and you've determined its boundary, its border. Let it be as big or as small as it is, and begin to pour your awareness into it as a tangible, three-dimensional volume of feeling space. It has a right, it has a left, it has a front, a back, a top, a bottom, and therefore it has a content, a volume within it. As you do this, you can ask yourself, is this sensation completely still and stable in every sense? Doesn't get any stronger, doesn't get any weaker, doesn't shift over here a millimeter or move over there, doesn't puff out, doesn't pull in. If it's perfectly still and stable in every way, you can ask yourself, okay, is this stillness and stability light and effortless and peaceful? If so, then just tune into the aspect of it being light, effortless, and peaceful. But probably it's not going to be light, effortless, and peaceful. Probably there's going to be a sense of pressure force. Then ask yourself, is the pressure force an inward pull? The proverbial gut tightening? Is it an outward push? Something trying to get out, push outwards? Or is it something yanking in and pushing out exactly simultaneously? The sensation may not change, but if there's pressure, and you look carefully, usually you can discern whether the pressure is inward, outward, or bidirectional. If it's inward, yield, let it yank in. If it's outward, yield, let it push out. If it's both at the same time, let it be both. And just stay with that. Stay with that, stay with that, stay with that. And you'll find that as you yield to those pressure forces, the sense of suffering may diminish. And often the sensation will begin to move. It may actually expand or contract. Of course, often when we tune into a sensation, it's not still and stable. We notice that it changes, perhaps very slightly, pushes in, pulls out. As we tune into its changing quality, its change may be stately and undulatory, like a jellyfish, or it may be more rapid and vibratory. Whatever qualities of change are there, yield to them. And the more that you detect in and out pressure or vibrations or undulations and yield to it, the softer the sensation becomes. And eventually, you're so fascinated with the movement qualities, how it expands, how it contracts, how it vibrates, how it jiggles. You're paying so much attention to the movement qualities that you don't have any time left to get caught up in the actual content of it as a discomfort. And it becomes pure movement, pure spirit. And you discover within that movement that there are two fundamental movements, an outward affirming movement and an inward negating movement. And these are the primordial ordering principles of nature. All over the world, there are systems that describe the spiritual source, nature, in terms of a pair of contrasting complementary activities. In the Taoist tradition, yang and yin. In ancient Greece, Pythagoras called it the unlimited and the limited. In the Neoplatonic tradition of ancient Greece, they called it the gushing forth and the gathering back. Heraclitus called it the advancing and the returning. In the Jewish mystical tradition, they talk about chesed and gvura, the allowing and the limiting side of God. So you discover in its movement these primordial aspects of nature, and this is the deepest meaning. It connects us with the source of all meaning. How about the thinking mind? As I always say, if there's one true and useful thing to remember about, quote, emotion, it is that emotion is a tangling together of feelings in the body and thoughts in the mind. We can just work with the feeling part. That's the easier part, that's the tangible part. But we can also work with the mental part, either independent of the feelings, or when we get really skillful, when we really have a high emotional IQ, we can simultaneously work with the thoughts and the feelings. Well, as I mentioned, the thoughts come in images, they come in words, they may come in more subtle processes. If we detach from the images and the words, give them permission to come and go, but not get caught up in their content, then they also start to show aspects of expansion and contraction. The thoughts speed up, they slow down. The voice gets louder, it gets weaker. And although I know it may be hard to believe, the thinking process itself becomes a kind of flow of energy. And we become so fascinated with the contour of that flow that we, moment by moment, are not caught up in the content of thought, but we're thinking. We become so fascinated with the movement of the mind that we don't need the meaning anymore because everything has the same meaning. It's part of the flow of nature. Everything means everything. Once you start to relate to the mind as movement rather than meaning, you might think that you become meaningless. But actually, every thought contains all meanings in the universe. That seems like a pretty radical claim, but remember, when a thing is a wave, it interacts with all other waves. Particles just bounce off of each other. They never interact. Billiard balls don't merge, but streams of water do. So It's a frightening thing for a human being when they first learn how to just let the mind flow without concern for clarity versus chaos. But once you get the idea, paradoxically, a kind of deeper clarity arises that's called the wisdom mind. So paradoxically, if you can just allow confusion to get stronger or weaker, like a jellyfish puffing out here and pulling in there, then after abiding in that state of fluid confusion for a period of time, an understanding arises that comes out of the very bowels of the universe. And it's called spiritual intuition. So they say in Japanese, taigi no moto ni taigo ari. There's great enlightenment to be found in great confusion. So one can treat the thinking mind the same way one treats the feeling body. And then one has covered the entire emotion. A lot of times, there's no way to escape from an emotion. No matter what we do, we can't change the circumstance. We can't get away from it. I remember I had an experience once a number of years ago when I first started to be on radio or be on television, that kind of thing. I discovered that I had this terrible phobia of the camera and the microphone. And when I looked at videos of myself, I was so stiff and so awkward and so zombie-like that I was just horrified. And I tried everything I could to get over this. I tried every relaxation exercise. I tried counting my breath, mantras. I had this whole panoply of approaches. And nothing I did would work. And finally, I had to just be willing to be afraid and just feel the sensations in my body associated with that phobia and feel it while I was on camera. There was no escaping from it. And what happened is, as those sensations became clarified through my awareness, they also became clarified in the other sense of the English word clear. They turned into a kind of transparent fluid energy. In a sense, nothing has changed. When I get in front of a camera or get in front of a microphone, I have exactly the same nervousness, except that because of all of the years of practice, it's no longer perceived as nervousness. Subjectively, what I perceive it as is a kind of bubbly energy of my on-camera personality. And I just ride on that energy, and it comes across looking just great. But all that is fluid fear. For me, all that charisma and personality is just my nervousness and self-consciousness and fear, which is now fluid, and therefore has released its energy in a way that works out really nice. People often ask me, should I just watch my sensations and thoughts, or should I do something about the situation? There's a problem with this question. The problem is in the little word or. They are thinking of what in the language of symbolic logic is called exclusive or. The implication in that question is you've got to do one or the other. You can't do both. It's a little trick of language. In point of fact, with regard to the external expression of emotions, we have 4 possibilities. 2 are always healthy, 2 are never healthy. Emotion can be expressed internally when we have mindfulness and equanimity with respect to the thoughts and feelings that constitute the emotion. We have internal expression. When we lack mindfulness and equanimity, when we don't have contact and we aren't allowing of the natural flow pattern of those thoughts and feelings, we have internal suppression. When we make sounds, facial gestures, take actions on the outside, we have external expression. When we don't do that, we have external suppression. So, there are 4 possibilities. We can internally express and at the same time externally express. Internal expression means we have mindfulness and equanimity. We're in contact with what is, and we're not interfering with what is. External expression, we make sounds, gestures, take actions. We can internally express, but externally suppress. We still have contact with what's going on the inside, and we allow its natural flow pattern, but because of circumstances or because of a personal or cultural style, we don't show on the outside. Of course, we can also internally suppress. We can not have contact and allowingness with respect to the thoughts and feelings. And yet, externally, we can be very expressive while that's going on. We might make all sorts of sounds and gestures, but they take us away from what we're actually feeling and thinking. So we're internally suppressing, even though we're externally expressing. And of course, the 4th possibility is we can internally suppress and externally suppress. The first 2 are always healthy because internal expression is always healthy. It's always catharsis. Whether one chooses to externally express or not depends on a number of factors. On the other hand, the second 2 are always unhealthy because we don't have mindfulness and equanimity. So even though a person may be very expressive on the outside, if they're completely unconscious on the inside while they're doing it, they're just blowing off steam. That's not real catharsis. So in some spiritual traditions, for example, Theravada Buddhism in Southeast Asia, they externally suppress. They don't show on the outside as a cultural norm, feeling. The problem is people look at that and they say, oh, these people aren't externally expressing, therefore they must be suppressing their feeling. They must be doing something that is psychologically unhealthy. But it's not necessarily the case. It's possible, but what they're actually doing, if they're practicing meditation, is that they're having a full internal experience, even though there's no external expression. So one shouldn't confuse the Theravada style of showing liberation with what we might call white-knuckle stoicism, which would be where you are externally suppressing and internally suppressing. On the other hand, in the Zen style of showing liberation, they externally express things. But of course, what they're attempting to do is also internally express. But people make a mistake, and they think that when they're blowing off steam, they're showing Zen spontaneity. Blowing off steam means there's an external expression, but without the internal expression happening. Real Zen spontaneity means there's an external expression that shows internal expression. So a Zen master might ask, how do you show your liberation when you bang your thumb with a hammer? To which the correct response might be something like, ouch! But that has to be a special ouch. That ouch has to not just be a full external sounding, but has to have a quality to it that shows that there has been a full internal experience that has flowed over into the sound. And by the quality of the voice, the master can tell whether you actually understand or not. So is it good to externally express or bad? Or does it depend? Well, obviously it depends. What does it depend on? Depends on circumstances, but it also depends on how you use the external expression. If you use the external expression as a guide to keep you in contact with what is going on internally, that's good. But if the external expression has distracted you so that you don't have mindfulness and equanimity, then you're just blowing off steam. That's not catharsis. When a person has complete internal expression and they choose to externally express, this is very good because their external expression is going to be appropriate. It's not going to be distorted by the suffering that comes about when we fail to internally express. And when a person is a deeply attained meditator, their internal expression is so complete that not only is there no suffering, but there is actually a vibrant, effortless flow of healthy energy flowing through them. My teacher of the last 15 years, Sasaki Roshi, is very old. He's 90 years old, and his students are afraid he's going to die all the time. And I've heard him say in public talks, don't worry about me dying. As long as I'm getting angry, I'm staying healthy. It seems like the exact opposite of what one would think, right? Anger is supposed to shorten your life, type A behavior. Is this just one of these cute things that Zen masters say to blow people's minds? No, he's being completely ingenuous, completely honest. For him, anger is a total internal expression. Therefore, it turns into a healthy, vital energy. I experienced living proof of that myself. He and I got into a little bit of an argument once about something. And I walked away and, I had the usual thoughts that people have. He's full of shit and blah, 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 blah. And after walking a little distance, I started to notice that I was smiling. Why am I smiling? I'm thinking all these negative thoughts. Why am I smiling? Go into meditation, tune in. My body feels good. That's why I'm smiling. And then I realized what the old man had done. He'd been yelling at me, he'd been shaking his finger, raising his voice. What we would ordinarily take to be the usual gestures of a pissed off person. But the quality of the movement of his voice and body were subtly but significantly different from an ordinary pissed off person. Yes, the pain of anger was there, but it wasn't being congealed into the suffering of anger. So when it expressed itself as sound and movement, there was an effortless, fluid quality to that sound and movement. And when those sounds and movements hit my body, it was like getting body work. It was like a massage. It was almost like he scanned me with a kind of sonar touch that massaged all my internal organs and made them feel good. I got to feel the pleasure of the fluidity of his anger directly communicated into my body by his sounds and movements. And the thought occurred to me, this is what they mean by the master stroke, the coup de maître. I understand what he's doing. I can't do it myself. I don't have enough experience, but I have enough experience to know what he's doing. So a real master can actually teach you and bless you with what on the surface would seem like ordinary anger. And this would certainly be a very noble goal that a person might have for their life. Since we cannot escape from these difficult emotions, that at some time, by working assiduously each time they come up, that at some time in their life, that person would be able to express enlightened emotion like the master that I just talked about. Certainly one of the most noble goals that any human being could have would be to express in this way their emotions as a manifestation, a teaching of enlightenment. But in order to do that, one has to start somewhere. Confucius said a journey of 10,000 miles must start with one step. The exercises that come in this series represent some tangible steps that you can make towards this most noble goal. We've covered quite a bit of interesting territory. Now, one last thing. I'd like to talk about the guided exercises. There are 4 of them, and they are graded. The first being relatively easy, and then the second and third more challenging, and the fourth considerably challenging. So don't feel defeated if you can't do all 4 of them. You may have one that you particularly like, and you can do that. On the other hand, if you're facing a really severe challenge, you might want to listen to the whole 90 minutes in a row to build up a kind of momentum, since each exercise builds on the former. You can use these guided exercises when you're passing through a difficult emotion. But you can also use them in some other ways. For example, if you're going to encounter a circumstance that you think may evoke a difficult emotion, you can do the exercise before going into that circumstance to prepare you. Also, you can do these exercises on a day-to-day basis as a sort of emotional tune-up, a clearing of anything that may be present subtly. At first, you'll listen to the tapes in order to learn the exercises. But as you gain skill, try to be able to do it on your own, without a dependency on the tapes. You may have to go off and be by yourself for a little while to do it at the beginning. But if you really internalize the skills, you can actually do these exercises and respond to the life situation simultaneously. Sort of like when you get good at driving a car, you can drive the car and do something else at the same time. But it takes practice. But of course, it's well worth it because of the tremendous empowerment and magnification of the very scale of your life that this kind of skill will bring. Although we've talked primarily about negative or difficult or painful emotions, it's important to realize that the skills that you will acquire from these exercises will also allow you to experience pleasant emotions with deeper fulfillment. Feeling is feeling. The ability to be precise, non-interfering, and cognizant of the essential energy nature of feeling applies to both pleasant and unpleasant, and indeed neutral feeling for that matter. When we apply it to unpleasant feeling, it reduces the suffering. When we apply it to pleasant feeling, it deepens the fulfillment. When we apply it to neutral feeling, that neutral feeling becomes a conduit to the flow of nature also. And also remember that because the feeling part of the emotion is body sensation, The skills that you'll acquire working with feelings that come about as the result of emotions are applicable to physical feelings, pleasant and unpleasant, such as the unpleasant sensations of illness or injury, or the pleasant sensations associated with making love or a good meal. So there's a very broad and universal application. When you are willing to work with difficult emotions in a meditative spiritual way, it impacts broadly all aspects of your life.
This concludes Session 1 of Breakthrough Difficult Emotions with Shinzen Young. Shakuhachi flute music by Stan Richardson. For more information on Insight Meditation or on retreats with Shinzen Young, please contact the Vipassana Support Institute, 4070 Albright Avenue, Los Angeles, California, 90066, or call 310-915-1943. Breakthrough Difficult Emotions with Shinzen Young continues with a series of guided meditations.